In the previous video, I discussed the different roles present in Genshin Impact, and then discussed the sorts of considerations which must be made when selecting a primary DPS. With the primary DPSs chosen in the previous video, we can now move on to discussing how to extract the best possible performance from that character, by discussing the concepts which will help you select specific elements or synergies to pair them with. But before we get into all of that, I need to first correct an error from the chart in the previous video. In awkwardly lore-appropriate fashion, I somehow forgot to add the portrait of Bennett in his recommended role. The chart has been corrected, as shown here. With his recommended role now currently represented, this complete chart is also available for download over on the Teyvat Historia Discord. But that's enough on this. Let's get into the actual meat of this video's topic. We'll begin with discussing reactions potential. If using a primary DPS Catalyst user, you'll need to recognize that they have no abilities which do not result in elemental status changes against their targets, which means that they are able to constantly trigger reactions if given the opportunity. This means if you select supportive characters with the ability to create frequent beneficial status changes for your primary DPS to react with, you'll be generating more damage for the entire duration of the battle. Examples of this would be characters such as Fischl, who can drop Oz on the field to generate Electro status continually over 10 seconds, or Klee, who can drop a field of mines that the enemies will trigger as they reposition throughout the encounter. Most other non-Catalyst primary DPS units will need to be a bit more opportunistic about how reactions are being generated, with Kuching being among the most clear exceptions to the rule. With this idea established, you will also need to understand exactly how the reactions work, and which reactions will give you the best returns for your chosen DPS. Here, I've displayed a chart, which I've prepared that shows the details of each reaction type. Using this chart, which will be available as of today on the Teyvat Historia Discord under the TH Official Resources channel, you will be able to explore the basic ideas of each reaction for the party you are trying to build. Continuing with Mona here as my primary DPS and Hydro Producer, her reaction options include Electrocharge, Crystallize, Swirl, Vaporize, and Freeze. Swirl is unidirectional. This means it must be triggered by the Anemo user. The damage scales on the character's elemental mastery. As it is not generally a status that stays on an enemy, Anemo is not an element Catalyst users will often have the ability to generate reactions with themselves, unless the Catalyst user itself is a Anemo unit, such as Sucrose. In fact, other Anemo characters, for the most part, work better in a supportive role, providing their best damage as the trigger for reactions upon statuses which you've set using other characters. Freeze is a bidirectional reaction, and is very useful as a control option, but does not in and of itself provide output opportunities outside of shatter damage, which cannot be generated by Catalyst users as it requires a Claymore to produce. Crystallize's primary intent is simply the generation of protective shields, which scale based on elemental mastery, and are adaptive to your reaction type, or the base elemental type of the enemy you've now triggered it upon. Crystallize, like Swirl, is unidirectional. Electrocharge is a solid option for damage output. It scales based on the triggering character's elemental mastery. It is bidirectional, meaning it can be triggered by either the Hydro or Electro user, but is generally better against larger fields of enemies, as opposed to individual targets, due to its 2-second cooldown between reactions per target, and the lower damage potential per reaction, which is a balancing factor, considering Electrocharge's ability to arc onto other nearby targets which are already wet. Lastly is Vaporize, which is often the best potential for a Hydro-based burst reaction. Scaling is equally based on triggering characters' elemental mastery and attack. It is intuitively bidirectional, dealing 2 times damage against an enemy if triggered by a Hydro user, and 1.5 times the damage if triggered by a Pyro user. Now, with all of this established, I mentioned in the previous video that a primary DPS is generally one with high attack speed or a focus on normal attacks, utilizing the attack stat or corresponding elemental or non-elemental traits. So, reactions based on elemental mastery will not make great synergy when triggered by Mona as a primary DPS. This leaves Vaporize as the primary synergistic choice for damage production. Fortunately, with a 2x modifier, it is among the highest reaction damage producers anyways. Now with the field narrowed a bit in regard to who should fill the secondary DPS role, the strategy is to take a step back and consider what your primary DPS is good at, and what its weak points are. These strengths and weaknesses will help to guide you, as you craft a team that will ensure that your primary DPS truly shines. Because they are quite annoying for Catalyst users, I wanted to pair Mona with someone who could give me not only Vaporize, but also provide the ability to destroy Dendro and Geo shields. Klee is among the top choices for this purpose, but this can also be achieved with characters such as Diluc, as well as Jinyan. To further illuminate this point, I will use my Team 2 as an example. This team utilizes Zhongli as a primary DPS. Like Mona, he has high attack speed, but somewhat low attack modifiers. This is likely as a result of his ability to create consistent damage production when fighting nearby his stone steels. In addition to this, his own ability to produce shields eliminates the need for a healer in many cases. As a Geo character, his only reaction type is Crystallize, which deals no damage on its own. Geo damage is then only dealt in conjunction with the use of the respective Geo skill upon which the Crystallize reaction is triggered, which means as a Geo primary DPS, at this time, other than Ningguang, you will need to focus on the utilization of physical damage. The goal then should be to find characters who can produce consistent damage while not on the field, or can debuff enemies, helping to increase the output of Zhongli. For my purposes, few characters provide better damage off the field than Fischl through the use of Oz, particularly when at max constellation. Since Jinyan's 4th constellation reduces an enemy's resistance to physical attacks by 15% while providing a damage-absorbing shield, she became the natural choice to aid Zhongli in producing reliable physical output. It is also worth pointing out that this 15% reduction would also apply if using Fischl as a physical damage primary DPS. Since Zhongli's Stone Steel have the added benefit of resonating with other Geo constructs, which increases the size of the area in which AoE Geo damage is produced. Any team built around him should seek out another Geo character to produce this effect. There are several choices, including Ningguang, Geo Traveler, and Albedo. Of these choices, the character which can produce this the most often is Albedo, as his E skill, Abiogenesis Isotoma, is on a mere 4-second cooldown. But not only that, since the entire playstyle of Zhongli revolves around dealing damage in and around the area of his stone steels, it's not much of a chore to use him within the even larger area produced by Albedo's Isotoma, which produces bonus Geo damage on hit every 2 seconds. This effect can be triggered by the stone steel, in addition to Zhongli's normal attacks. Even Oz is able to trigger this effect, and will not only add to the effective damage production while Zhongli is on the screen, but also due to the presence of the 2 Geo characters on the team, it provides Geo resonance. Which brings me to my next topic. When building a team, I don't think it is a stretch to say that utilizing elemental resonance is one of the most important core mechanics, and will often separate a good team from a great team. Now looking back on my Team 1 Mona Vaporize comp, the idea of such a team is to give Mona as many opportunities to produce Vaporize reactions as possible. Since, as mentioned, Mona is a Catalyst user, and is never unable to generate Hydro. And while Klee is already quite capable of giving Mona a wide field of potential Pyro to interact with, due to her mines and being a Catalyst herself, a second Pyro character will both enhance that potential, whilst simultaneously giving Pyro resonance. In addition to that, since Vaporize scales on attack, Pyro Resonance will also enhance that reaction. Resonance opportunities, whilst team crafting, should rarely be passed over without strong consideration. This is because the following effects can be achieved by having 2 members of the same element. Each of the respective resonance options will benefit some team comps more than others. I'll break down a few of these briefly, and explain what I believe to be their most optimum usage. Impetuous Winds decreases stamina consumption by 15%, increases movement speed by 10%, and shortens skill cooldowns by 5%. This resonance would be particularly helpful for teams which are built around primary DPS units, which require a lot more precise dodging, and will help you if you struggle with your stamina management. This is a problem even I struggle with at times. Additionally, the shortened cooldown times will help a lot if you're using a secondary DPS unit, such as Child, who suffer from long cooldown elemental skills, albeit only modestly. Fervent Flames has the somewhat lesser regarded effect of reducing the time spent affected by Cryo by 40%. But, more importantly, increases attack by 25%. This really helps vaporized comps, since that reaction scales based on attack equally to that of Elemental Mastery. With that said, a 25% boost in attack is nothing to scoff at in almost all team compositions. It will make just about any primary DPS, secondary DPS, and DD deal significantly more damage in just about every aspect. Soothing Water intuitively reduces the time affected by Pyro by 40% and has the primary effect of increasing incoming healing by 30%. This in theory will be helpful to make better use of healing effects generated by characters such as Diona, Bennett, Chichi, or Noel, as they all provide only healing over time effects. It may be easy to be lured into using this resonance with a healer such as Barbara, but as she already provides effective healing to begin with, this is somewhat unnecessary. You could attempt to use Barbara with this resonance if your intent is to use her normal attacks to provide reasonable damage output, providing her with a kit more geared towards attack and Hydro benefits, leaning on the resonance to provide additional heal scaling. I'm not sure what real benefit this would bring at this time, since any of the other Hydro characters currently on the roster would provide significantly better output for the investment, so at this time, I do not recommend this course of action. With Geo Resonance at our disposal, you can see that my Zhongli party, by merit of having a second Geo character, picked up enhanced shields and 15% bonus damage when protected by a shield. And indeed, this will be very effective on a team where 3 of the 4 members produce a shield. With my Mona party, a second Pyro character provides a 25% bonus to attack, which means those vaporized reactions, which scale on attack, get 25% more deadly. There were several factors for me, which dictated which character would most effectively take up that 3rd slot in my Mona party. But much of it, in my case, was based upon some unique equipment opportunities. For those of you who have seen my streams, you know by now the 3rd member of my party is Diluc. He brings a unique synergistic opportunity to this party through the use of a particular weapon, which I will cover in the next video. Beyond this, with the short cooldown of his elemental skill, he is able to very effectively apply Pyro status to enemies, particularly boss-type enemies, for further vaporized opportunities with Mona. Xinyan would also be able to fill this role within this party, but as she can only produce consistent Pyro damage through the use of her Elemental Burst and only at high constellation levels, or when using her Elemental skill nearby several enemies, she has less overall potential to provide on-tap Pyro status compared to that of Diluc, so he has maintained this role for that reason. So moving on, now that I've discussed all 4 slots for Team 2, but only 3 slots for Team 1, that only leaves 1 remaining. This slot should be reserved for a healer or a reliable shield producer. Knowing now that the team utilizes 2 catalyst users, a 3rd would be ill-advised. This eliminates Barbara as a potential healer, not to mention the fact that Hydro Resonance does not provide much benefit to damage output, and is largely a throwaway as a properly built Barbara will scarcely require the extra 30% healing it offers to begin with. This leaves Noel, Chichi, Jean, Diona, and Bennett. With these options established, let's discuss briefly what makes each unique. Bennett carries with him the potential to be a second Pyro in the team, a buffer, and a healer, all in one. A compelling option certainly. But his heals do carry with them a few limitations, which make it hard to utilize squishy characters, such as Catalyst users, in more challenging fights. Additionally, to properly utilize his Elemental Burst, you'll want to have both the enemy and your character within the field generated by the burst, which is oftentimes too close to an enemy to safely deal reliable damage. Whatever advantage may be gained is often lost by having to reposition much more frequently. Not to mention the fact that in order to extract benefit from the healing within that field, you again have to stay near the enemies which are causing the damage in the first place. Chichi at first glance provides some interesting synergistic opportunities, as she would be capable of providing cryo reactions resulting in freezing for Mona, and melt for Klee and Diluc. However, in my personal circumstances, Chichi is the only character I do not have, so she is not a viable option at this time. It is worth noting, however, she's not really an ideal healing option for a team based around a Catalyst primary DPS. Her heals are all over time, which may put your DPS at risk if attempting to use her Elemental Burst as a healing option. Additionally, due to the close range nature of Chichi's elemental skill, it is often not able to be realistically utilized to produce frozen reactions consistently by Mona, or really, cryo reactions by any ranged DPS, often enough to be useful or effective. This would make her a synergistically weak choice overall. Much of the same cryo opportunities, which could be utilized by Chichi, can also be obtained by using Diona. And while her shield is useful, she lacks the ability to burst heal, which is important for a team which is in good part comprised of glass cannon type characters. She would, however, be able to act as a sniper, freezing enemies made wet by Mona, allowing for superior control over the field. Diona is again a bit less of a compelling choice due to a lack of instantaneous healing for a healer in this comp. And just like with Bennett, because you have to remain in the field of her elemental burst to get those heals, it is very easy for the enemies to box you out of that heal, rendering it ineffective. Noel is an interesting choice. Her shield is quite effective for damage absorption, but unless you have high constellation levels, her heals can be unreliable. If built properly, however, she can be capable of modest damage production while simultaneously offering effective healing. She offers good utility to most parties as well. Through the use of her charged attack, she can knock down most small and medium enemies with ease. The final healing option is Jean. Jean has arguably the best healing available overall, with her burst healing being quite substantial, with the added benefit of consistent healing over time after the initial cast. Additionally, her charged attack has the capability of holding enemies in the air for a good duration of time prior to knocking them down, making small and medium enemies an easy target for Catalyst users. Jean's elemental skill, Gale Blade, has amazing capability for keeping space between a Catalyst primary DPS and the enemy by easily throwing them a large distance from their previous location. She even has the opportunity of throwing them from cliff sides or from the borders of the Spiral Abyss. Lastly, Jean offers a unique synergy with Klee, which allows her to use her elemental skill to collect Klee's mines and throw them at enemies, or to draw the enemies as well as the mines to a single location for easy damage production, which then results in swirl damage upon release. Due to Jean's laundry list of mage supporting features, she continues to be the healer chosen for Team 1 at this time. Now that both parties have been constructed, the next phase in the process will be to identify which artifacts and weapons we should use. This will be covered in the next video, in which I will go over the process for how to select weapons and artifacts that will help each character properly carry out the intended role within your party. This concludes the second installment of this series. I hope you found it to be useful. If you did, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so that you are notified when my next video goes live. If you missed the first part of this video series, in which I discuss the roles which exist in Genshin Impact, you will find it displayed in the end card of this video on the left side of the screen. Thanks for watching Teyvat Historia. May the 7 guide you, travelers.